You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to Arsenal Pass, episode 135. Hayden, I have one thing to start off this pod with, and that is, who the hell is Tom Dowling?
That is a great question. Tom Dowling is now a Calling finalist, but also Sydney local, awesome guy, and I'm going to say is now going to be seen as kind of a pioneering father of Dash.io, and let's see what that means for World Championship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kind of came out of nowhere, at least from the international perspective. So maybe from people who are not local, had not heard too much about Tom before, but I think after this weekend that will change. Did take Dash to a very impressive performance. I can't even remember. Was it 14-0? What was it?
Yeah, so he's the first person to sweep a Swiss in a modern Calling, and I think the first person, or the third person to do it in any event. I think it's been done at 2 nationals prior to that, and one of the original Callings beforehand. But the first to do it in kind of the modern view of Flesh and Blood, and to do it on a completely, not that people weren't talking about Dash.io, right? But a lot of people had dismissed Dash.io. I was one of those, can tell you about that. And Tom telling me about this deck for weeks. So Tom's a friend, and he's a local here in Sydney. And yeah, he went 14-0, and then 12-0 in Swiss, and then 14-0, made it all the way to the finals. Had an insane game against eventual winner of the Calling Melbourne, Ben Dodge. Congratulations to Ben on Uzuri, who also had a great run. Who ended up taking out Tom in the final, a nail biter of a final where it came down to this kind of last turn where if Tom draws a blue off his Spark of Genius, he takes Ben's entire hand, basically puts him to 1, and Tom is basically in the ascendancy from that turn, and misses the blue, and then Ben has the kind of turn set up to come back for lethal. So yeah, just a kind of insane game, honestly, and everything I'm hearing is that I didn't get to see it, obviously I'm at the event, but that the coverage and kind of the games, especially in the top 8, were just some of the best games of Flesh and Blood that people have seen in a little bit, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting because people were talking about Dash.io. I know we tested Dash.io a little bit, but the issue with the deck was everybody was building it wrong. You're just going too much down the rabbit hole of trying to make it this, hyper-focused combo deck or something like that, and it's just not. It's not exactly its best role, and I think that the list that Tom put on display is the optimal version as of now of how to build Dash.io, and I think a lot of people got sucked into trying to do busted stuff or do some big combo setup, etc., but that's just not the play. I know Legend Story Studios, they were very vocal on Twitter about quite vindicated that this hero was able to make it into top 8. Oh yeah, it was.
That's a different story. Well, look, I feel, I can see it from Alice's perspective, right? They sat there being like, what an accomplishment this kind of top 8 has been. Max also, made top 8 of this event as well.
That one's the most surprising to me.
Uzuri wins, so they get their 6th. Yeah, we'll break down the full top 8. Don't you worry about that in this pod. But they get their 6th hero winning a 6th Calling in a row, right, or whatever it is, 6th premier event in a row. So from LSS's perspective, obviously, I can totally understand kind of how they're probably feeling not playing the event. I will say. From my understanding of not my understanding, from my personal experience, and also from others playing the event. Look, this meta, and I think the closeout of Lexi, I think a lot of people were using this as a kind of Lexi was dead to them already, I will say. Let's say, like a lot of people were disrespecting Lexi. Lexi was not as prevalent as it probably should have been. A lot of people were putting the target on Dromai's back as opposed to Lexi, and probably somewhat rightly so, but it felt like a very interesting event, and the meta felt not, I wasn't the most excited about this meta, let's put it that way. But Worlds is on the horizon. Lexi has now hit Living Legend, which of course, officially as of Monday with the banner spin announcement, which we'll get to, is gone. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Worlds meta game looks like. And I think this really does throw something in the works, which is awesome.
My biggest thing that I said to Hayden, because I was not aware that Hayden knew Tom, I was like, why the hell did he not save this deck for Worlds? Well, he wasn't planning to go to Worlds.
He wasn't planning to go to Worlds.
But now he is going to Worlds.
He is going to Worlds. He is coming. Yeah, which is awesome.
I had heard people talking about Dash. Obviously, the California kind of Arizona team mentioned it on stream at Dallas, and you're like, okay, but like we had said before, if people are going to bring out a rogue deck, bring out a deck that people are not expecting, that is a dark horse per se, they're going to do it at the World Championships. They're not going to do it the Dallas Calling or the Melbourne Calling. And Tom was like, nope. Brings it to Melbourne and puts on a dominant display. I love what this does to the World's meta, though. It really throws a wrench in it, because prior to this tournament, the target was on the back of Jermai, but while that's still partly the case, I think that the target is going to be on the back of Dash.io. I think a lot of people are going to show up prepared to face that deck, and that probably changes a little bit of Dash.io's strategy and how the deck is built.
Yeah, I think if your team's sitting there, you're going, okay, let's test Dash.io. Does it change our preparation in terms of like the decks we were looking at? And if the answer is yes, which it probably has to be yes in some way, then you go, okay, is this deck, how powerful do we think this deck is? If we think this deck is powerful, is this a contender for a deck we should be playing? And even if the answer is no, but you think it's powerful, then you have to consider that you think other people are going to pick up this deck and play it. Like 14-0 is no, you don't just 14-0 by accident, right? At a calling, at an open event calling, like Tom played his bad matchups. He beat 2 or 3 Uzuri on his way to top 8. Before finally falling in that final, and he thought that was probably his worst matchup. He beat Bravo. Like, I saw him playing these games. He beat Fi, which he also thought was like a tougher matchup. And like the way he kind of piloted the deck, and I got to I didn't make day 2, Brendan, so I got some time to watch Tom play a couple of games, and his kind of understanding of the deck. Like, this is a high skill cap deck, I will say, and I think it's going to take groups and teams and individuals a little bit of time to get their head around this. Like, I don't think you can play a couple of games of this and go, it's inconsistent, and move away, because Brendan, that's exactly what I did. And that's the reason I did not play Dash.io last weekend.
14-0 is pretty consistent. Even though it's one tournament, I mean, 14-0 is consistent. My biggest question for Dash.io, and I know we're in the news section, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but my biggest question is, can this deck survive having a target on its back and other people being aware of exactly how the deck works? Like, how does this deck evolve looking at the World Championship meta? Because, the monkey's out of the box, as they said in Pineapple Express, but, like, people know how the deck works. They saw Tom display it on stream many, many times. So that deck surely has to adapt, because people are not going to be surprised about it when they sit across from it at the World Championship.
Yeah, I'll let you stew on that. But we also do have a deck tech that's going to go live probably just after this pod with Tom. Tom is, kindly agreed to come on and talk to us about the deck, the design philosophy, and maybe the forward kind of thoughts on Dash.io. But just a small little story, Brendan. So 2 weeks ago, or 2.5 weeks ago at this point, right? I guess basically by the time pod drops, it's actually like 3 weeks ago. Bright Lights has just dropped. Tom messages one of our group chats and says, "Guys, this hero's broken. Like, I'm having so much fun with this. I've been goldfishing. I've been playing a few games. You guys should pick this up." This group chat involves me and Nick Butcher and 1 or 2 other friends, and we were both like, "Come on, man! Like, seriously?" And he's like, yeah. Okay. Sends us a list. I played a couple of games, and I immediately like boosted a tome or something, or saw a tome on top and just got super frustrated at the deck, or I think I drew a hand of all items and then took like 1 million damage from an aggro deck, and just messaged back. And I was like, this is way too inconsistent, man. Like, I don't know what you're seeing here. Week goes by. Tom goes, "I've been playing it all week. Honestly, I think I fixed the issues. It's broken. You guys got to check this out." This is about a week and a half before the calling now. I'm like, okay. He's like, all right, he's like, ProQuest. He won a ProQuest already the week before, a draft ProQuest. He's like, I'm coming to ProQuest this weekend. I'm going to play it. And I'm like, I guess you've already got an invite. You don't need to bother playing a real deck. That's fine, right? So he shows up. He makes top 8. We play like the last round of Swiss for like undefeated. I'm playing Droma. I'm like, all right, come on, show me the deck. You're 5-0 right now. Show me the deck. And the deck just does nothing for 4 turns, and he just dies. And I was like, what is come on, man. What is He's like, you've got to play it. And I was like, I'm not playing this in Melbourne. He's like, I promise you that was an anomaly of a game. He messaged me afterwards, messaged the group. He's like, look, some of the issues from the weekend, here's the fixes for these. Convection amplifier is insane, etc., etc. Like, okay, play another couple of games of the deck. I'm like, nah, Tom, there's no way, dude. I don't know what you're smoking.
I think you're a bit jaded.
All history now.
From you're a bit jaded from Sasha, another person we've tested a lot with.
Felt table.
Yeah, Sasha. I mean, Sasha actually will. He has gotten some steaming piles of dog shit and told us it was broken. It was the next big thing. So I think you're just a bit primed to be like, nah, dude, nah. I got to see it in action.
Literally. So you know what? Hey, humble pie on that one. Tom was definitely right, and congrats to Tom, congrats to Ben, and congrats to the rest of the top 8. Just a quick shout out on there. We'll kind of transition to the news, Brendan, but Michael Fing making another top 8 in there as well. And Lexi, it was good to see him, and Brody had travelled as well. There's a few other international travellers. Matt as well was there. There's some a lot of New Zealanders actually. Obviously, New Zealand ends up taking down the calling on Australians' home soil, which no Australian ever likes to see. But I'm a neutral party. I'm half and half at this point, right? I live here, but I'm from New Zealand. So yeah, congrats to top 8. Very interesting top 8, which we will break down. But you want to talk about Week in Flesh and Blood at all? You're heading to Worlds, so has there been kind of like a lot of casting prep for you? They obviously made the announcement of the casting team. You'll be there. You'll be casting. Have you been prepping in a specific way? What's it been sort of for you? So
there's been some meetings, which are interesting. It's an interesting concept, I'll say that. Anyway, I'm not going to break up that can of worms, but basically this, if you noticed by last week's podcast with me with the diligent stare for all those YouTube viewers, I was traveling, so I was on vacation. Most of my prep, to be honest, happens in the testing house, because for people that aren't a part of a testing group that gets a house a week before and haven't been a part of that process, like, you go pretty freaking hard. Like, you go, like, it's like 12, 14 hours a day of just straight up Flesh and Blood, or straight whatever game you're preparing for. So that's really my primer. And my key role in that group is just gauntlet decks, right? And there's pretty much no better way to learn the game than to be the gauntlet deck guy, because you're just playing all the decks that are possible to show up at that World Championship meta. So that is where the lion's share of my preparation is going to come from like a professional player sort of analysis standpoint. That being said, the World Championship, I'm not on color. I'm play-by-play. So
interesting.
Honestly, my exposure to the Dallas calling would have prepared me enough. I mean, the fact that I'm going out there a week before, I wouldn't do that to prepare to be a caster. I think that's way above and beyond, especially in the context of like how we're compensated. But I go there to help you, help Sasha, help my friends prepare and have a good time. Like, it's enjoyable to me. I enjoy that. I enjoy trying to break metas and all of the thought process that goes into selecting a deck. So, not too much prep the week before, other than conversations in our Discord and draft strategy and sort of philosophy, but like macro philosophy behind what deck we should pick. What are we targeting? What's our expected metagame, etc. But there's a lot that happens when you actually sit people on the team in a room physically and you start cranking out games. I mean, that's where the lion's share of the work is going to happen.
To be honest, it's interesting. It's not really been my experience because I haven't had these. I'm usually the late flyer.
Yeah, you never show up. That's why.
Well, it's hard with work. I get in late, unfortunately, all the time.
It's a luxury, right? It's a big luxury to be there a week before and get to do that.
I wish.
It's definitely a huge ask. I mean, it's honestly my favorite part about playing competitively is that week beforehand.
It's great.
But yeah, I mean, it's a big ask to go out there 7-10 days before and just be cranking game, because like, I don't think people understand like how much Flesh and Blood actually gets played. It's disgusting. Like, it is literally 12 to 14 hours a day. I remember, like, there's a reason why we don't bring our spouses to these things anymore, because it's just really, we tried it in the past, but there is no time. There is literally zero time. And if we get so in the sauce that if we go to dinner or we go to lunch or we go to something, like, it is like pulling teeth. It is painful. And all we're talking about is Flesh and Blood while we're there anyway. Like, we'll probably even be playing like little mental games of Flesh and Blood. Like, we're cooking. We're cooking the week before.
My favorite is at dinner when you've been playing, like, I don't know, did you say you've been like playing Class Constructed all day or something? And then you go to dinner and then you're just walking, you might be talking about something else, right? For a little bit, for like maybe like 5 minutes. And then someone goes, all right, pick one, would you? And then that conversation, I remember at Calling Auckland this year, it was myself, Dan, our friend Dave, editor Dave, and a couple others. and the three of us, we were going to get lunch, and I think two others were with us as well. And then we, like, the whole walk, the whole of lunch and the whole walk back, we talked about one specific interaction with Frost-Hex and the ultimate matchup, and how we wanted to, like, stack our Frost-Hex and the damage multiplier on Frost-Hex in the matchup for a good 2 hours. That was the whole conversation. And then we got back, and then we played the matchup.
Yeah, I remember me and Sasha were at the first Auckland Calling, and we went, it was prior to the tournament because it was all done in one day, which was fantastic. And we had our Ninja Turtle deck. And we actually went to dinner with Nick Butcher, Luke Badger, and some others. I remember we were sitting at this dinner, eating Mexican food, and then, you know, like 20 minutes into the dinner, I look at Sasha, he looks at me, and I'm like, hey, I think I want to change the deck. He's like, he pulls up his phone, and he goes, all right, so here's all the cards I'm changing. And then we immediately, like, we pay with cash, and we leave early. Like, we just, like, we gotta go fix this deck.
Dump it on the table.
Yes, actually, like, this is the eve of the tournament, like last minute, we go swap up everything, and then we're up to like 2 a.m. trying to fix it. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to be in the sauce the week before. I'm super excited, and I'm pumped because I think from the Saturday that I get there, so I'm leaving on Friday. We're recording this on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. I think both Majin Caleb, Majin, and Peter Budensek are there in person on that weekend as well. So that's way more testing and resources than we've ever had. Because most of the time it's me and Sasha flying out a week before, and then for like 3-4 days it's just me and him cooking, and then the other people kind of trickle in. So
cooking. I'm
pretty excited, to be honest. I love that
I'll
stuff.
see you on Wednesday evening.
Yes.
In classic fashion. Also, Sasha told me that you might be the gauntlet guy, but he has another name for you.
No, what's that?
Errand boy.
Errand boy.
Fetch me some food while we play some games, boy.
Oh my goodness. I'll be the den mother. I'm holding down the fort.
Oh, it's something's gone wrong if you're the den mother, bro.
We're very, very right. We're very, very right.
I mean, I can add a little bit more to the Calling Flesh and Week this week in Flesh and Blood, but I'd love to get into the news. I mean, just want to suffice to say, I had a great time. I did a lot of drafting. I didn't have a good run at the Calling. I went 4-3, missing day 2. I would say, Brendan, you know, this sounds a little bit salty, and fair enough. I feel like I got a little bit gemmed on the weekend playing Jeremiah, but also I definitely feel like I wasn't feeling particularly confident in the list. I had a list that was very ticked for the mirror. I ended up playing in great fashion, a couple of Reinars. Oh, I beat a Reinar, which, you know, I wish that was on stream. That would have been great. Played some Katsus, played some Ice Elixirs. I don't think I played a meta deck. Uzuri was the most meta deck I played against in my 7 rounds of Swiss on day 1, which was pretty funny. Maybe you could take Katsu.
Yeah. I mean, you're due your gem format, because I showed up to PT. I showed up to PT2 and played, and this is PT2, by the way. Both these decks don't exist at PT2. I played freaking Ice Lexi, then Kano. I was like, what? Bro, what the fuck? That was the mono Briar meta.
Blame yourself for Kano, dude. Blame yourself. But you know, it was a great time. Got to hang out with some people. Got to hang out with some people I hadn't seen in a while, who, you know, Brendan Patrick. People like Jason Long, you know, who is a multiple-time Calling top 8 competitor. He's trying to make a run back to get back into the game a little bit. Well, he was this weekend. Oh yes, I forgot. I lost to him in Swiss. We got paired in Swiss. Mm-hmm. He was playing an anti-Dromai dash deck. It was just literally pure all poppers. It was this silly defensive deck that I don't think Dromai could ever beat. So that was nice. We played in Swiss. That was great. It was a nice 50-minute game where I definitely lost. And then we ate a lot of food. Melbourne is great for food. If you're ever in Australia, I recommend, if you're going to be in Australia, make sure you get yourself to Melbourne and make sure you eat a lot of food. Some amazing food done that way. News, Brendan. First of all, you can officially say goodbye to Lexi Livewire and Classic Constructed. Monday saw the new ban suspended announcement, and of course the Living Legend check, where Lexi does leave. We already knew this was happening, of course, well past the 1,000-point threshold, but now officially gone and will not be at the World Championships next week. Of course, changing up that metagame. All Tales of Aria heroes are now gone, and the 6th Living Legend hero.
Yep. I mean, Lexi definitely overstayed her welcome a bit, for sure, especially in these these tournaments like Dallas and Melbourne. Yeah, I think people would have liked to see her go earlier, which they're changing. We'll talk about that. But yeah, it's funny because I see on Twitter, it's like you immediately see people start complaining about the next thing, and then they made this change to Living Legend. Now people are like, I really don't like that, or they like it. And I think LSS's general tone, to be honest, on Twitter is just kind of like a big F you to like any sort of complaint. Not in a bad way, because I'm actually like waffling between this idea that like great games, great products, just like great things in general tend to be made by tyrants. Not in like the most aggressive meaning of that word, but people who really champion like a sort of leadership role over their vision, and they maintain that over anything else. Because I think if you start catering to too many people and too many opinions, you try to make a game for everyone, you end up making a game for no one. And the best things, like the best games, are made by these like small, passionate teams that maintain that hardcore vision. So even if I don't agree with LSS's decisions, their strategy sometimes, the state of the meta, the formats, etc., I do actually kind of respect like how on the nose and kind of I just respect them actually sort of having the integrity to maintain their vision, even if it ends up being incorrect. I'd rather them do that than actually listen to all of us complain, to be honest. And that's the thing, is I'm waffling this idea where it's like, are the best things, like are the best products, are the best games, are they just made by tyrants who don't give a shit about what anybody says? Because you can take feedback, but if you use feedback as actual changes, I think that's where the issue comes. It just but you can take feedback, put it through your filter, and then maybe apply. But I'm assuming my theory is that true vision, true leadership, and just like I know what's right actually ends up building the best games. And Flesh and Blood is my next experiment to test that theory.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it through history and through other companies, right? Small startups,
Yeah, the iPhone wasn't created
companies
through,
like Apple.
A survey. Yeah, it wasn't created through a survey. Like, what do you want? No, it was like they had a vision, and the idea is that they know what you want more than you do, and I respect that to an extent. Yes,
and completely in that vein, speaking of surveys, thank you to everyone who responded to our survey. As we look to take on advice from the community, look, we're a bit different, right? We're not a company with a vision. We're two dudes and some support networks who want to create an amazing product for people who want to learn more about the game and enjoy listening to a Flesh and Blood podcast and getting videos on decks, gameplay, etc. So thank you to everyone who responded to that. We're going to digest all those responses. There's been already some great stuff that's come out of it, so we're excited to implement a little bit of that, look at ways that we can format the pod, but also other content we do on the channel. So, all right, Living Legend, Brendan, let's talk about Living Legend because it has had an update. It's had a bit of a facelift, which, you said, you did call it a couple weeks ago, Living Legend is due for another change. I'm not sure this is quite the change you were thinking with this.
V9. We're on V9 at this point.
Minimum. But look, it had to come, right? I'll quickly spit out what's happened here. So there's been some changes to the points per event. New 4 wins to Living Legend heroes. So World Championship has gone from 200 points to 300 points. So obviously World Championship now can almost give a third of a Living Legend status to a hero with a win. Pro Tours through down to National Championships, there's no change. So Callings, Champion and Nationals, no change. Battle Harden is the most significant. And we are getting more Battle Hardens. And this is going to look to be a significant way to Living Legend heroes through the season. We're going from 10 points for a Battle Hardened win to 40 points. So a massive change there. And there is one Nationals change. Nationals with less than 96 players capped would now go from 10 to 20. And then the other one, PTI events have gone from 4 Living Legend points to 20. There's no changes at ProQuest or Road to Nationals level. And from a Blitz perspective, Skirmish has doubled from 2 to 4 points. So heroes are going to Living Legend a lot faster, Brendan. And there's 17 heroes or now 16 in this current Classic Constructor format. There's more than that, sorry. No, there's 18. And LSS want to progress and move the hero pool faster, it seems, and they've been pretty clear about that. And this is a change to do so. It, to me, feels a little bit like a change that's going to help enable maybe a bit of balancing as well, which, I know they keep saying Living Legends is not a balanced format, but I think the core of it is a little bit of this rotation idea that we talked about.
It is like an ad hoc rotation for sure. So there's a couple of reasons why this is happening. One of the reasons is actually, Brian said it, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was over 20, but they're planning on introducing a lot more new heroes to Flesh and Blood in 2024. So they want those heroes to be relevant, and they feel comfortable with heroes rotating out and being replaced by others that can utilize the card pool that previously existed for the hero that has now left the format. There's some criticisms for sure. And I think they're relatively valid. Like, I remember Mara Ferris was on Twitter. She was saying, I don't like this new system because if I'm a specialist, like, it feels pretty bad in my hero Living Legends, and I just, like, I can't play it, like, the next week. And for people that are not tuned into Twitter, maybe don't follow the Flesh and Blood website, like, they're going to end up walking up to a tournament, like a new Pro Quest or an Army, and be like, oh, by the way, F you, bud, you can't play that anymore. And then they just, like, 90% of their card pool that, their collection is now useless until it gets reprinted. So, that's real, but I honestly, Hayden, I think that, Lexi and some of these other decks, they've really overstayed their welcome sometimes after they hit their bans or, Living Legend status. I support the change. I don't know if it will work. Like, I don't know if it will be a system that feels good for players, especially casual players or the players that make up the majority of the game. But I'm open to change, and I'm interested to see how it will land. For me, as a person who has access to cards, and I'm not trying to say that in an arrogant way, but I do have access to cards. I can, get decks relatively easily, and people, I don't know. I have a good system to be able to build a new deck. It's a more interesting system for me to engage with because I don't have that issue. But I do think that this system could be super punishing to a lot of players, right? I don't know. Flesh and Blood is a hero-based game. It's an empathy. You empathize with your deck. It's part of your identity. And then you're walking up to armories. It's just like, you can't play that, bud. It's just like turbo rotating out. So, good and bad. I think it's just it's a strategic decision, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm all for it, to be honest.
Yeah, and just for context, because I don't think we quite got to that part as well, Brendan, but what you were kind of alluding to with the showing up in your heroes band, the Living Legend change also now means that there is a Living Legend check that occurs every week.
Every Monday. Yeah.
Every Monday. So if let's say, I saw someone joke about this on Twitter, let's say Brody Spurlock flies to a battle hardened in the US on a Saturday, and Living Legend's a hero with an extra 40 points, or 60 across a PTI, and him and Lucas Oswald team up for a PTI and a Battle Hardened win to put 60 points on a hero, and it ticks over. On Monday, that hero would then hit Living Legend, and then next week for the Pro Quest, maybe it's the last week of Pro Quest or whatever, that hero would be unplayable because it would hit Living Legend. So it's an interesting change, the fact that things can Living Legend during a season. I think, look, I would have liked to have found a middle ground for this a little bit personally. It's like we have a 3-week Pro Quest season, great. Okay, the 3-week Pro Quest season happens, then we check Living Legend. Then we've got 2 weeks of callings, and then we check Living Legend again after that. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of felt, like you said, Lexi outstayed her welcome a little bit with Dallas and Melbourne potentially. But it also felt like had that happened maybe midweek midway through Pro Quest season 3, although these callings were tied to it.
Yeah, devil's advocate, because I know PQ attendance, at least in the United States, was pretty low, and a lot of people would point towards Lexi being the root of that cause. I do think that, so regardless of our opinions on the system, my opinion on the system, whatever, I'm going to take this I want to take a gamble. Let's take a gamble, Hayden. I think that this system will be changed in 6 months. I do not think it will work. I think that's going to lead to too many people complaining, and it's just so visceral, right? Like, there are actually going to be people that identify with the deck. It's like their deck. They're happy. They finally get to play it. Maybe it's powerful, and they're going to show up to an armory or a PQ, and it's just like randomly banned. And then like maybe depending on how the cadence of the sets release, like you could be a player that doesn't have a entire collection of Flesh and Blood, which is probably almost everybody on this planet, and you could be someone who just has warrior cards or just has like light warrior cards or something like that, and then like 90% of your collection just got deleted from being useful. I mean, arguably it's like, go play it in Blitz, go play it in Living Legend. Let's be real, those formats are not super real right now. Let's be honest, those formats are not super real right now. So I think that's going to be, it's going to be intense. Like, I think some people will have some very strong feelings about that system when it hits their hero. I agree. I want to throw one last thing in there, which is that I think that will be the case for a short term, but it's been made pretty clear by LSS that they want to provide hero options for those classes, right? They want to allow that to speed through a little bit quicker. So it's like, in the chain Living Legend a while ago now, right? And then we didn't get Vincent until midway through this year. But in the future, it sounds like we would get a Shadow Rune Blade a lot quicker on the turnaround. Not say that we definitely get the month after or anything, but it does sound like their aim is to make sure that there's little downtime with the playability of those cards. Let's say. It sounds like the stars would have to align to me because the sets they're not dynamic, right? They're kind of static. They're set in stone.
Designed.
And, designed, and they have a specific set of heroes, but Living Legend is not a static thing. It's dynamic. It's dynamic based on wins. So you could just have, maybe the hero that's or the hero in class being released in Q4, rotate out in Q1, and now those cards are unplayable for a year.
That's a balancing piece. Yeah. But yeah.
I actually don't want to give too much opinion on like if I like the system, I don't like it, whatever. I actually just episode 135. I want us to take gambles, Hayden, on over or under. Is it going to be changed in 6 months? I guess it's not clear which one's the over and the under. We're getting a new version of Living Legend, some way, shape, or form. This is a very safe bet, by the way. In 6 months, this will be changed. That's my gamble.
Why don't we take the months? You can take the over under. I'll set a line, and you take the over under on the months. How about that?
Okay.
You just give me a little bit of a hint there. So you said you think within 6 months we get a change. What about? I'm going to set the line at 4 months. Do you want the over 4 months or the 4 and under? I'll give you the 4 and under or the 5 and over. On Living Legend change.
5 and over is too easy. I have to take 5 and over. It would have to be 6. It would have to be 6 or over or 6 or less, I think. So that's pretty conservative at that. Yeah, I'd take the 5 and over.
Now you look like Mr. Conservative. Love it. All right.
I just think that like 4 is like it encapsulates pretty much like Q1 of 2024, and like
we haven't even got to a pro tour at that point, basically.
Exactly. So I don't know. It's an interesting change, as vastly different strategy, and it's definitely aggressive. This could be great for the game. This could make the game so much more fun to play. You could make the meta so much more dynamic, but it also could be like a kick in the stomach for players constantly that are sort of invested in these single heroes or single classes, and their shit just becomes unplayable.
Yeah. Let's talk banned and suspended as well. This Living Legend announcement did come accompanied by a banned and suspended announcement, a scheduled one, which if you had followed the banned and suspended announcement prior to this one, it was said that this next one would be would be used to basically Living Legend Lexi and potentially Icelander. Icelander survives. Lexi Living Legends. Voltaire Strike Twice, also Living Legends. Bullseye Braces moves from suspended to legal is the big change, which I think comes as no surprise. It looked like that was pretty much close to set in stone because it was suspended until Living Legend of Lexi Livewire. So Azaleas around the world rejoicing to get their Bullseye Braces back, and I think, we can talk about what that means for Worlds. Blitz, Soul Reaping is suspended until Chain becomes Living Legend. So a little bit of a nerf to Chain, given its dominance in the Living Legend format. Interesting though, because it is a Chain specialization. So, right? It is, right? Soul Reaping?
Soul Reaping, it's either, I don't know. It could be a Shadow Rune, but I don't know. Probably Chain specialization.
I'm pretty sure it's Chain specialization. And then those are the changes. So the next scheduled ban and suspended announcement will happen on Monday, December 18th. So we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. Pretty disappointed. Would have liked to seen backup protocol restricted on this. No, I'm kidding.
Backup protocol.
I'm totally joking. It was just funny because I remember, some people were talking about like, oh, are they going to ban Tome? Is there going to be additional changes to Dromai? And now,
oh yes, the chain. Yes, what Dromai bans are we going to get?
Yeah, but, exactly. That's why I'm memeing and saying
LSS were definitely talking about that on Twitter over the they were tweeting about how vindicated they felt about no need for Dromai bans.
The LSS stuff is hilarious. I think that it's funny because a lot of it. I mean, not a lot of it, but there is a non-zero amount that's probably directed like literally straight at us, and people say the things that we say, but I think it's so fucking funny, to be honest. Like, I think it's so funny how they just bring that middle finger right up. It's just like, it's hilarious.
No social media policy over there. All right. Skirmish is back from November 18th to December 10th. Blitz and Bright Light Seal deck, so enjoy. And lastly, Brendan, we have a bit of an announcement. World Championships is happening next weekend, and we have a team announcement for the World Championships. Brendan, we have teamed up with Premier Card Gaming PCG for a team for the World Championships. Look out on Twitter for that announcement for the 5 players that will be playing and competing at the World Championships as Team PCG Pass, Arsenal Pass, and PCG combined. I don't know, not much else to say. You'll recognize some names and faces, so go and check out our announcement on Twitter over there on Arsenal Pass.
Oh, you're not spoiling the lineup here?
I mean, I can do. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I'm keen.
I can't read off all the accolades though, because we'll be here for about a month if I have to read off everyone's top 8s and wins. But
there's definitely one person that's sneaked on there that has a short list.
Dude, that's a bit mean to Matt Rogers.
Yeah, I remember I was looking at Matt Rogers' accolades because it's written down in a Discord chat, and I was like, nine calling top 8s? Like, when did he do that? That's ridiculous.
9 calling top 8s. Yeah, so the roster is Matt Rogers, Nick Butcher, Tarek Patel, Isaac Crew, Juha Sainalampe, Pro Tour Baltimore top 8 competitor, and also multiple time calling top 8 competitor as well, national competitor, top 8 competitor. Myself, Brendan Patrick is in there.
Nepotism.
And
Let's go.
But you aren't playing this one. Have I forgotten anyone else? See, this is why I didn't want to do it.
Did you say Isaac Crew?
Isaac Crew, yes. But Isaac will not be at Worlds, I believe. So it is the 5 of us playing this time around. Brendan in the booth, Isaac at home. Looking forward to it. So go check out the announcement. Give us a bit of love on Twitter. Yeah.
Yep, jerseys included. Jerseys are included.
Yeah, that's true. Commander Cookout time. We got a question from the Discord. If you want to get your questions into the Commander Cookout, we've had some awesome questions recently. So yeah, some really interesting questions. People sort of pushing on things we've said in the pod, pulling on things that have been in the sort of community, the wider community that have been discussed. And we love these kinds of things. So if you've got some questions about some hot topics, please get them in. Those are the ones we get to the front of the queue as well, because they're very timely and we love to talk about those. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can drop them in the in the YouTube comments below. Let us know it's a Commander Cookout question, or you can DM us on Twitter or tweet at us, whatever you want to do. This question this week does come from the Arsenal Pass Discord, so if you are a Patreon in our Discord, you can drop a question in there. There is a channel for that. This is from Trent McBee. Pretty sure that's Trent McBride, right?
Yeah, I played him in Indianapolis.
With decks being able to be built into Surprise, Full Fatigue, brackets Charles Dunn at Nats, Matt Vore at Dallas, etc., the need for scouting has increased. In the most recent pod, Hayden mentioned scouting when his round 1 opponent did not show in Taipei. My questions are, is scouting good necessarily for the game to have? Should LSS apply any countermeasures to scouting, bracket top tables being table 1 and counting down versus random table numbers like we have seen in other games?
I love this. I love scouting. It's a funny ethical gray area in card games because
is it?
No, I mean not really, but surely you're going to have people who would say that you're immoral or unethical for scouting or something like that. I mean honestly, I can't even be bothered most of the time. But the thing is like it's not against the rules, and yeah, it gives you a pretty decent advantage. And scouting is multiple things. It's walking across tables. It's looking at it's looking at the stream, having your friends message you who are watching the stream. It's also hiring a third party who's not playing in the tournament to walk around and create an Excel sheet on what people are playing and write down cards. Shout out to Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
It's like there's varying degrees of scouting, and it's pretty much like you can't avoid it to an extent. Like if you're sitting next to someone, you're going to see what they're playing. You might be able to determine their archetype. So it's both intentional and unintentional. And because that line is so fluid, you can't really create a rule against it, or at least it's hard. There's definitely ways that, like you said, you can mitigate it, mitigate sort of the unintentional scouting by potentially spreading people apart. But honestly, like Flesh and Blood's commitment to maintain competitive integrity, actually, like they do it to an extent that's actually a little bit too much in my opinion right now, which is we don't actually watch or record drafts. That's completely a competitive integrity thing, and I think it absolutely destroys coverage. And pretty much everyone at LSS agrees as well, or everyone on the coverage team. Like there's just people come up to us and they're like, "Why don't you do that?" It's like, trust me, we all agree with you. We would love to do that, but basically, top down is like you can't do that. So LSS, I mean, Flesh and Blood is a game that does try to mitigate people getting unfair advantages by knowing what cards are in your deck, or just anything that's outside of playing the actual game. That being said, I think scouting in Flesh and Blood is pretty minimal, to be honest, because you do reveal your hero beforehand. Obviously, the archetypical scouting is really where you get the advantage. If someone's on like a rogue deck, and I think in the current state of Flesh and Blood, it's not an issue. Because, for instance, like a lot of the decks that I've played at I don't know, high level events have been or have definitely gone down in power level as soon as people knew what deck I was playing. I just think at this point it's part of the game. No one's really abused it to a level in which I felt like it was kind of icky, because that happens. Like with the hiring a third party or whatever. It just hasn't happened. I don't think it's too much of an issue so far. Definitely, it's just a risk you incur, and If you play some sort of dark horse deck that is, fatigue deck, you're surprising your opponent because they thought you'd be on a different archetype. I think at this point, as players, we usually we take on the risk, or we take on that risk where it's like, okay, as we progress through the tournament, people are more likely to know what game plan we're on. And honestly, when we have these conversations internally, we pretty much assume we're like, okay, we'll be surprising our opponents, and it's like, but when we're in top 8, we have to be prepared for people to absolutely know exactly what we're on, have tested into this, if it's like a pro tour or something like that. And it kind of changes up the strategy sometimes of the deck, but I don't know. At this point, I would say in Flesh and Blood, I don't think it's been a problem, but that's a very subjective take in turn.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think so is it part of the game? Yes, to a degree. Is it something that I think is an interesting part of the game? Also, yes, because I think it influences your decision when it comes to choosing a deck. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to a Calling, and I'm going to take this deck that is a very atypical strategy, and I'm going to flip my Katsu, and then my opponent's going to board and all the defense reacts, and then I'm playing a defensive Katsu deck, right? That is a very interesting sort of decision you make, and you do get an edge there. But obviously, the flip side of that is that as you progress through the tournament, your edge lessens and lessens as people know what deck you're on, know what strategy you're on. Like, let's take this Dash Fatigue deck, for instance, right? They played against at the Calling. Round 1, round 2, it surprised the opponents, right? Mm-hmm. And then later, as the event went, the opponents knew they were trying to fatigue, bought in their remembrances, bought in their, their sort of anti-fatigue packages that they had ready to play the event against these players once they knew who they were and where they were from. Like, one of the players even said to me, "Oh, I made the mistake last round of telling my opponent where I was from." So they knew what deck I was on when I flipped my hero, because I had same places as these other players are from. But I honestly think that's an interesting part of the game. And I agree, there's a fine line, right? There's this kind of gray area of could it get a little bit icky, a little bit, you've got these big teams who are using their power of the number of players to basically scout out rooms and then know exactly what archetypes people are on. Yes, that is true. But I think because of the known information that happens in Flesh and Blood, like you say, when you flip your hero, unless you're an individual, if you're an individual, I will admit, you are kind of on the short end of the stick a little bit. You could be in a spot where you don't know what archetypes your opponents are on, but a lot of other people in the room know what archetypes you're on and also your opponents. And I think that is kind of a little bit of the concern people probably have as individuals. But I think that plays into what you choose to bring to an event and how you choose to sideboard and how you choose to build your game plans. Do you hedge game plans? Do you kind of say screw it, no one's bringing this archetype because it's unplayable, or this is the now dominant archetype as you go through the event, and let's sit down for 20 minutes after this event of this round, guys, and we've got to try and come up with a plan for this new archetype we haven't seen before. These things are all super exciting to me, I think. So there's some more small negatives, I think, to this ability to scout, but there's some interesting things it does to the game. And then the overall is how would you fix this anyway if you did see it as an issue? I know Trent here talks about, table numbers being moved around and stuff, but going and watching the top tables is such an awesome part of the game, and seeing what people are playing and what's doing well. And yeah, I think scouting in Flesh and Blood has less impact because of the known information.
Yeah, and the system that Trent described as well would not erase scouting. It would probably just minimize it. It would also just make it easier.
Make it harder. Just make it harder.
Well, it would also adversely react the individual way more than it would the collective team who has resources 100%. And people. So it's a weird thing to try to balance. I would just say at this point, Flesh and Blood is one of the games where it matters the least, in my opinion. So far, it matters the least. Hit your bingo card, because Brendan's about to talk about a different game, and that's my bingo card. Channeling my Roger Bodie by talking the third person. Just kidding. Yeah, Lorcana is a game where it is so freaking obscene to know what colors your opponent is on. Dictates so much in your opening hand and drastically increases your win rate. And they don't have any system to mitigate it. And I think they're going to get slapped in the face when people utilize that for a major competitive advantage. And that would all be mitigated if you revealed your colors beforehand or something like that, and you had a hero, because it takes away 90% of the edge, and the rest of the 10% is maybe you scouted their archetype, whatever. But I don't know. It's funny this question was asked about Flesh and Blood, because it's absolutely freaking obscene in Lorcana. It's unbelievable. I digress.
I can see that. All right, thanks for the question, Trent. Again, if you want to get your questions in, please do so. Great question. I'm sure this debate will rage on a little bit, but I think my view is right now it's it's not an issue. Could it be an issue in the future? Yeah, for sure. We've seen it be issues in other games, right? So
I will say that I don't like it. Like I think you talked about a few things about where like you thought it makes it a little bit more exciting. There's definitely some fun to it. I think overall, if I was gonna bring out like a sentiment about it, taking into account everything about scouting, because sometimes it does make things more fun. I would say overall it's a negative thing. I don't think it's positive. But I don't think that there's a reasonable reality that you could curate where it happens 0% and nobody gets like screwed over. Because I think the more like kind of the harder we try to make it, the more it usually just ends up benefiting teams and people that have extra resources. And ultimately it's not that bad, because in Flesh and Blood it's not that big of a competitive advantage. In some other games it's a problem for sure.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Melbourne Calling and this meta game and Dash.io a bit more. Breaking a new meta at Melbourne. Very interesting sort of results. I want to talk first a little bit about the expected meta, because we talked about the meta game last weekend, and some things were definitely kind of what we thought, right? Mm-hmm. Lexi and Jeremiah were the top 2 played decks.
And the third.
What's that?
And the third deck also.
Bravo, yeah, Bravo as well. And we thought that there'd be some Katsu around. I think the kind of metagame as a whole was kind of what we expected mostly for day one. Lexi most played, Jeremiah, then Bravo, Dash, Katsu, Uzuri, Icelander, Azalea. And yeah, I did say I thought there'd be more ninjas this weekend, just given the kind of how people like ninjas in this area, and also kind of, I think, with the rise of Jeremiah, and Bravo made sense as well. So quite interesting sort of, I guess, yeah, I mean, it flowed, right? And it made sense. But then as we moved into day 2 and into top 8, that kind of changed a little bit. The one thing I thought was interesting was just how close the number of Lexis versus Dromos were at Melbourne. So just for context, there was 276 players in Melbourne, which, fun fact, what's that, 8 less players than Dallas? Half the prizes, Brendan? How does that one work?
Yeah, they just, the US gets preferential treatment. I don't know. I mean, I got a question for you though. Is that a win for Melbourne? Is that number a win? Because like we talked about, like yes. Taipei, that's a win. Dallas, that's a huge freaking L. So in Melbourne, it's a win to get 276 out.
I think it's got to be. I think given where this meta is at right now and kind of what Dallas put up the week prior, I think it's got to be a win for Flesh and Blood. I think that's. And for Melbourne for future events, I think like it would have been amazing to see them crack the 300. And there was a lot of people playing side events, I think, through the weekend. Maybe not as many as I thought. Like the overwhelming and I think events like this, when you have travels and stuff, is that the majority of the players are going to be playing the main event. But they were also filling out side events, which is great to see. So
yeah, so you guys get half prizes. What is that? I wasn't even. You said it, but I don't actually know.
So there's scales to the calling. So the perceived larger callings will have, I think it's a 20,000 prize pool, and then the smallest have a 10,000 smaller quote marks. So Taipei and Melbourne, both $10,000 prize pools, and 20,000 for Dallas. So
that's I think that hilarious.
I think that needs to be reviewed. I think that was based on a kind of an idea of expected players and turnouts and stuff, and I think it's not probably the best way to look at doing that. And I get that they want to make sure that if there's more players, then there's a bigger prize pool, but can they work out a way where it's scaling and they can actually potentially do that?
Scaling is hard as well.
Tough.
Scaling is also hard because
yes, because it's hard to budget for, and it's hard to let people know.
You don't know what the EV is, or like if nobody shows up, it's a complete waste of money. Yeah, okay. You guys are just paying the like location tax because you are in beautiful Australia or New Zealand, and Texas is just a hot desert. So
yeah, but Dallas, surely it's pretty expensive, but being one of the largest cities in the world.
Oh my fucking god, it is one. That is a statistical fact. It is one of the largest cities in the world. I want to say, Hayden, for this metagame, I did think that Bravo. I think that Bravo is. I just want to call it right now. I want to cast my die. I think Bravo will be the second most played deck at the World Championship.
Interesting. I mean, if you just take out Lexi from this meta, it would have been the second most played deck, right? So I think that makes sense. Like clearly people like Bravo. Clearly people want to play Bravo. I mean, we can talk conversion into day 2, but Bravo had good conversion into day 2. It was the second most represented deck in day 2. It went from 27 copies to 9 copies in day 2, which was better than Dromai. Yeah, I mean, interesting. I still don't know. I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Bravo pick this weekend because it's interesting to me. Nick Butcher, he was talking about playing Bravo this weekend. He ultimately went back to Dromai and put up a top 16 with Dromai, bubbled out of the top 8. But he was talking about playing Bravo. He's like, I think the Dromai matchup's good. I think, I get to prey on people probably bringing Azalea to kind of combat the ninjas, and I get to have a pretty good matchup into the ninjas. And I was like, cool, but how do you beat Lexi, man? Like, what's your plan into Lexi? And that still remained my question for Bravo. What is your plan to Lexi? And is it good enough? Lexi's gone now. So looking forward, does that mean that, Bravo is legitimately one of the main contenders for this World Championship? And I'm skeptical, honestly, still, because I think it's hard to know what this metagame is going to be. And yes, maybe you're targeting Dromai, but what else are you expecting? Like, are you expecting... the IO matchup, I think, is, like, reasonable for you?
People think it's really good. Like, that's the rhetoric I see.
I've heard that. But what about Icelander? Like, is Icelander going to be played? Because Icelander's matchup into IO is not like Dash OG's matchup. Yeah, it's pretty reasonable. So, yeah, and I don't want to play Bravo. Personally, I wouldn't want to play Bravo into a field of Icelander. And also, if people are going to bring Inventor Extraordinaire, it was the 4th most played deck on the weekend in Melbourne, rising up a little bit over the last few weekends, Dallas and Taipei as well. Is that a deck you want to play?
Icelander's looking like a good pick for the World Championship, not gonna lie. If you have that in your toolbox, like in terms of how the metagame is starting to coalesce, I think Icelander's looking like a good pick. Because Icelander's matchup into Bravo is good. And it's a Dromai, it's serviceable. Some people think it's decent.
It's good into Katsu. Great into Katsu even.
Great Nikatsu. It is good into everything. That is one thing that's nice. Is like if you do get those random gem pairings, you do pair into these random Reinars and whatever. You are just one of the most powerful decks in the game. So there's nothing that just like ultimately. I don't think there's any non-meta deck that just kind of counters you. Right? Like, there's not going to be some rogue deck. I don't know. Like, Icelander just
Inventor Extraordinaire is pretty rough for you, and Azalea is not that great for you.
Yeah, the Inventor Extraordinaire, I think, is the biggest issue. And you're right. So Azalea for me is would be the number one. I think that's the one you got to dodge, is the Azalea. But I don't know. Azalea, I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to be people were picking Azalea to prey on Lexi, so as Lexi leaves, like, you wouldn't play a deck at the World Championship to target Icelander. That would be ridiculous, because Icelander's probably going to be the 4th most played deck.
It's good against Dromai. Like, you get Bullseye Braces back now. You get to cut a bunch of these cards you had for Lexi, and you get to put in some cards like, get to go back to Inertia, makers, basically, as opposed to Wither token makers. So what does that allow you to do? You can probably lean more into your Dromai matchup, and your Iceland matchup is already pretty good. Plus, you get to sort of double down on that a little bit. I don't know, man. Like, Azalea is interesting to me. I am trying to decide whether I bother packing my Azalea cards. I've been talking to, some of the Canadians, Gabe and Mike. I'm like, should I pack my Azalea cards, guys? Like, I don't know. So, but I only have so much room, and
well, I'm not playing the event. I'm bringing Icelander and Kano. So if you need a lend, I got you.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, I won't bother bringing those two. I wasn't going to bother bringing those two anyway. I don't think Icelander's for me this event. I do actually like playing Icelander, but I've played so much Dromai now and so much Icelander prior to that I just can't bring myself to sit on the Icelander side of that matchup at a big event. I think that's where I'm at right now. But who knows? Honestly, maybe the meta subverts a little bit with the kind of what people are expecting, and it kind of gets almost like it almost like devolves, not evolves, into Dromai not even being like one of the top 2 played decks of this format. Like, I could see that happening at Worlds. I could see people just getting off Dromai to Dromai counters and counters to Dromai counters, going to the level 3 decks, and all of a sudden Dromai's the 3rd most played deck at this event, and Bravo and friggin' like Dash or Katsu are the top 2 most played decks. Like, they'd be insane.
So I will say, for precedent, that has never happened. Like, the meta has never gone that many layers deep, because it feels like at this point we're a week or so out. It feels like that's a possibility, that everybody could try to metagame each other, and then we all end up in this like layer 3, like layer 2 to layer 3 meta.
2.5, whatever.
Yeah, but that has never happened. People. Like, the best deck, in our opinion, in most people's opinion, this meta is Dromai is the best deck. The best deck is always the most played deck. You see Bravo having these consistent results in terms of representation, not in terms of performance. I mean, it's performing okay, like you said, in day 2. And we know it's a comfort pick. And then I think like that 3, 4, 5 spot is kind of where you're like, I think that honestly 3 could be like 3 and 4 could be a toss up between Dash IO and Icelander, and also Dash Inventor Extraordinaire. Those are my 3, 4, 5 decks. And then past that, it's like Ninjas, Uzuri. Uzuri won the tournament. I know that Dash IO is going to get a lot of the the limelight, but Uzuri did win the tournament, and that should correlate in the boost in terms of representation for that deck.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I will counter. Do you think Fire was the best deck at Worlds?
The World Championships? No, I think Icelander was the best deck, but it wasn't the most. But that's, yeah, you're right.
It's the fourth most played deck, dude. It was the fourth most played deck.
So that was.
And my argument was I actually thought Ultim was even potentially the best position deck, and it was the second most played deck.
Could have been.
People devolved to the aggro deck. Like people went, okay, what's the aggro deck? And then they played it. So Worlds meta was kind of wild to me, honestly.
Yeah.
And we're about to walk into another World Championships with a big shake-up of the format. This was with no shake-up in the format, really.
Yeah. Icelander was unrepresented, but the deck was, I guess, it was a little bit newer. Yeah, it's tough to say. I guess in retrospect, it does feel like Icelander was really the best deck because of how commanding of a performance Michael Hamilton put up. But you're right. I'm trying to remember the conditions of the World Championship and how the hell that happened. Because I'm wondering, did we have like a season before that set a lot of precedent for these aggro decks being very playable and like a good number one pick? I can't remember.
Hypothermia got banned. Hypothermia got banned in Icelander.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. Let's take a little bit of a tangent. Let's cast our die for 1, 2, 3. Because we're not gonna have another podcast till we're sitting in person. The next podcast is gonna be in person.
Sure.
Let's do one.
So we're just doing this weekly then. We're doing this weekly with 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
We need to go back and make sure we listen to this. Or can someone in the comments, if you remember last week, what were our 1, 2, 3s, and then drop down our 1, 2, 3s for this week. And then what we'll do is we'll copy that over to next week and we'll do the same thing. So come on, someone in the comments, please help us out. Tell you what, I feel like we need a bit more poking in the comments on things we say. So why don't you also, while you're at it, go for me and Brendan a bit more in the comments on YouTube. And then also let us remember from last week, what was our 1, 2, 3 last week, and then put our 1, 2, 3 down this week, and then we'll take that over to next week. And tell you what, if you can even do that, we'll even shout you out for doing it.
I was thinking like maybe we should put up a challenge for 1, 2, 3s. Like if someone nails the 1, 2, 3, but the problem is like multiple people would probably get the same 1, 2, 3. If we did a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you got all in a row, I feel like they should get like a jersey, you know? Yeah, but I don't know if that's logistically possible.
I can't be bothered. Shout outs enough. Come on, guys.
All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. My 1, 2, 3 is number 1, Jeremiah, number 2, Bravo, and number 3. It does. I think it's gonna be I'm gonna go Dash. I'm gonna do it.
Which Dash?
Dash Inventor Extraordinary. Could be Dash IO. You know what? I'll go Dash IO. I'll be fun. I'll go 1 Jeremiah, 2 Bravo, 3 Dash IO.
Okay. I'm gonna go Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm. Don't disrespect the man here.
Katsu.
Oh my god, no way.
It's close. Jeremiah, Katsu, Azalea.
Okay.
I think the meta is so close. I think decks, to me, 2 through 6 is so close right now. That's where my head is currently at, based on I think people are going to come off the Bravo band, like the train on Bravo. Well, we'll see.
No way. Those guys are.
We'll see.
Those guys are filling up the freaking bongs and just hitting the copium to infinity, bro. There's no way.
All right.
Okay.
Well, this will make for an interesting top 3.
Someone hold them to that, please. Someone hold them to that. That's.
I get next week. I get next week to potentially change my thoughts. It's just my sort of like insight this week and post the event on the weekends. Yeah, I don't know, but it feels. Yeah, I think you're right about Bravo, but I just something's telling me that I feel like people are going to start to walk away from it. Why don't we talk conversion day 2 Melbourne? Okay. Because that is interesting, and that maybe is going to prove your point. Bravo had a great conversion as a day 2. So Lexi was, after day 2, Lexi was still the most played deck, but then it was Bravo and then Jeremiah. Dash also had reasonable conversion. Iceland had great conversion. Fires and Uzuri's not too bad. IO's was great, funnily enough. Katsu's was not good from a conversion standpoint. And neither was Azalea's. I don't think a single Azalea made... Oh no, one Azalea made day 2. So maybe I'm looking a little bit egg on face already from what happened in Melbourne. But
Kano really good.
Lexi... Kano was good, was it?
33%.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Dash was 50%, right. So it's like pretty close.
Yeah. Max was pretty low, but then Max went into top 8. So yeah, interesting from that meta perspective. What about, I guess, the top 8 breakdown, right? So in top 8, we ended up having, of course, the Dash.io. We also had a Max, and they played in the quarterfinal. That game was on camera. Was that game on camera? No, it wasn't, but they played in the last round of Swiss on camera. Yeah. Same result though. And then you had the 2 Uzuris, you had a Joromai, and you had 3 Lexi. So I think, honestly, Lexi was a great pick for the weekend. People were kind of disrespecting it, and I think people rightly decided to play Lexi. And the Uzuris got rewarded for performing well and getting into top 8, where there was a number of Lexis. Both Uzuris making it through to the semi-final to set up a Uzuri versus Lexi, Uzuri versus Dash.io. And Tom takes out another Uzuri on the way, and then gets taken out by Ben in the final on Uzuri. So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, we've got a deck tech coming out with Tom, but just quickly, I think one of the really interesting things and takeaways for the rise up of what Tom did with Dash this weekend. Obviously, great player, but bringing a deck that kind of subverts what people are expecting for the weekend is just such a great call when it's on. It's such a good idea to do, I think. We've seen this through history. Saw what Charles done at US Nationals, with the Fatigue Briar, for instance. Like, when this is potentially on, it is a really great shout. And I think, Tom had a very refined list, a very clear set of game plans for playing into this meta, and, kind of went and executed on it. And I think we're going to see this time, even Joel Gibbons in top 8 with Max, right? Not something that people would expect. Again, doing something very, very similar. The Uzuris, people not testing against Uzuri, not being prepared for Uzuri after it kind of dropped off the map a little bit, doing the same thing. So I think, these open events where you have a powerful strategy and you can kind of subvert what people are expecting and you have good game plans, you get super rewarded. I mean, not just open events, but closed events as well, which is awesome.
Yep, for sure. I just want to shout out Tom, and I want to put an idea into his head, just how much more money he would have if he had done this at the World Championship instead of Melbourne. It's so interesting that we see a dark horse.
Well, he wouldn't be there. He didn't have an invite.
I know. He didn't have an invite. Should have bought a BTI. Would have been worth. It's so interesting to see a deck like this come out literally the tournament before. It's very, very atypical, and it totally changes the tone of the World Championship. So us as a community, as players, as casters, as whatever you wanna be, we are now spoiled because the question is so much more complex. It would have been cool to see Dash.io break out at Worlds if other teams had that in their pocket. But now it's super interesting because everybody was saying, like, how do we target Jermai? How do we be ready for this? It's going to be the most played deck. We got to be ready to beat it. Every deck must be able to beat Jermai. But now I think Dash is going to be highly represented. Like, it's not an exact correlate, like, correlation is not the right word, but last time we saw a deck see this much of a performance and in an undefeated manner, like at the UK National Championship, and the conversion to the US National Championship was absolutely insane. It was so many people hopped onto that deck that were not playing it before. Maybe an easier deck to play. I mean, definitely an easier deck to play. But I think that a performance like this, especially because there's such a narrative behind it, can really influence the decks that show up. And I think there could be a lot of Dash.io. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Hey, look, Dash.io is very, very powerful. I think now, after watching Tom play some more games, we played a couple of games with testing the other night, and look, obviously my respect for that has gone up, and it is powerful. So I think people are going to jump on this, see how powerful it is, and whether either it's going to define the testing over the next few weeks for those groups and individuals, or it's going to be the deck they play. Like, I just think that is it. And I didn't put it in my top 3 just then, but I think that's because it'll probably be 4th. I think it will, I think maybe not enough time to adopt it, but it is really powerful. I mean, ask me next week, and with what I'm hearing from testing and the testing that we're doing, maybe it's like the second most played deck in my view. Honestly, it's so dynamic, I think, what this meta could look like. And that's why, I think right now, with where I'm sitting, people are looking for counters to things, and I'm like looking at, Droma obviously, but then looking at Azalea and Katsu, and I think we're in Europe. People are hot on Katsu. That's kind of my thought process there. But yeah, it's interesting. What about Max? I want to ask you about Max. I don't know if you caught any of the coverage and saw this Max deck, but it's a Nitro Mechanoid Max. Do you think Max is viable? Is this the real deal?
I'd be happy to disrespect it and then get memed later for disrespecting it, but I'm gonna go ahead and disrespect Max. I don't think that it's like, I see Dash.io, like I saw the game plan executed multiple times on the stream, and I'm like, that's a deck. Like, that is a real deck. This is a huge contender for the World Championship. Mm-hmm. I had the opposite sentiment looking at Max, to be honest.
It's interesting because Tom said that the quarterfinal was really close. What if the story was that, Max makes... I mean, obviously Max didn't do the 12-0 run, which is the insane part, right? But, what if Joel on Max makes it through to the final and, has a nail biter against the Uzuri, and, it's a difference. I mean, I don't know. The matchup's like, maybe it's even better. Maybe Joel ends up winning the event on Max. Like, would that have changed the narrative?
So to be fair, I'm decently ignorant of the deck list, but I don't know how consistent it is. Like Dash.io looks very consistent, which is a key ingredient to have. And I don't know, decks. The thing is, you can be totally wrong. Decks sneak in the top 8 all the time. That doesn't necessarily negate their achievement, but it happens. Like we've seen that happen tournament after tournament after tournament. Does it vindicate the choice? And well, I don't think to be highly represented at all. But is it going to have a good run at the World Championships? I don't think so. I don't know. I really don't know enough about the deck. Obviously, I haven't been testing it. I haven't played it a lot, but it just does not. It does not impress me in a way. The hard question to answer. It's like I would prefer to just say no comment, but it's a podcast. I'm obliged to give a comment. Now, I'm happy to be memed if
you're not obliged to do anything. You can just shut your mouth. It's fine. You don't have to do anything.
Well, I'm happy to be memed if it does well. I feel confident enough that it's not going to do well at the World Championship.
Yeah. And look, I think the last thing I kind of wanted to end the pod on a little bit and talk about Dash.io. We've got this deck tech coming out with Tom, which definitely go and check out. He tells it, obviously a lot better, but I think the kind of difference maker from like the list that people were looking at, and look, people might have had lists similar looking to roll them out at Worlds, right? And their cover's been blown, but Tom did it first, and he did something that hasn't been done in a very long time or at the scale before, this number of players with this cleaner run in Swiss. Is I think the biggest thing is the refinement of the deck list he looked at. He came up with these game plans that allowed him to play in a super consistent manner. He had these kind of plans for how he navigated bad draws. Conviction Amplifier, I think, was like an MVP for like his plan of pushing these kind of setup turns. And he had this really kind of dynamic sideboard plans that he changed. Like, sometimes he was playing like 60 cards, sometimes he was playing 63, 64, sometimes 70 cards. Like, he had a really good understanding of why he wanted the cards in his deck and when he wanted them. And I think that is a really good lesson for people to take away for future of deck building, that things are not linear. Even with a deck that looks linear in terms of its aggressiveness, there's something to take away and learn about how to approach matchups and how you can, attack a metagame in a particular way. Because I bet right now, we'll ask this of Tom on the deck tech, but I imagine that he's already got thoughts of how he would change this again, and if he's taking this to Worlds, what he will look to potentially be doing differently. I'm sure he has those thoughts. I don't know if you'll share those, but
it's drastically different if you're being targeted to an extent. Maybe it doesn't change the deck list too much, but it's a way different scenario. It's like nobody knows what this deck does, nobody knows you're on it. And then it's like everybody, this is like one of the number one decks in their mind. I assume the deck to change a little bit before Worlds just to try to counter tech whatever tech people are going to bring for it. I have a question for you, Hayden, though. So Uzuri won this tournament. Uzuri had 2 in top 8. I mean, Uzuri is a deck that definitely, in a sense, preys on Lexi. Where is Uzuri positioned in the World Championship? Do you think that it's well positioned? Do you think it will be highly represented? Because this is one of those decks in Flesh and Blood. This is one of those decks that occasionally has performances, but just always seems to kind of be niche.
That's a great question. So what I think back to, right, before I answer that question a little bit, is Pro Tour Lille, right? We have a calling the week before Pro Tour Lille. I don't know if you remember that. Singapore. Do you remember what that was won by?
Yeah, that was won by Dash.
It was won by Dash. Boost Dash. Talishar Boost Dash. How prevalent was Dash at Pro Tour Lille?
So I know Joel Reppa was on it. I know Christian Hawk was on it. It was...
Yeah, Christian top 8'd on it?
Yeah, so it was non-zero, but I don't even know if they were on the same version. I just know we tested into it. Like, the thing is like, I don't know, you can litmus test these decks the week before. We tested into it, and Briar was just a better deck in our opinion. And that's...
7th most played.
Yeah, that was the
7th most played.
That was the conclusion we came to. So yeah, but I don't know. It's like, I don't even know how to delineate these categories, because Dash is in its own category, because it's done that like 3-4 times in a row. It's still like on the play.
Well, at the time it hadn't, right? Yeah. Like, this was the first major win for Dash outside of a national championship, right? Was Jason Zhang taking this to the calling and doing that in Singapore. But I guess why I'm bringing that up is Uzuri kind of feels a little bit similar to me. It's a great meta call for this event, a great pick for this event. But then you move into a meta that no longer has your quote unquote like prey on matchup, right? Like, Lexi's gone. So what does that actually mean for Uzuri? And I think, my answer to that is it means that Uzuri is even in an even worse position than it was before. And I don't think Uzuri was particularly well positioned in the meta, but I do think, that weekend, especially on tight play and really good matchups, was a great weekend for potentially Uzuri. Obviously, it turned out that way.
Yeah, potentially.
Top 8, one winning. Yeah, obviously turned out that way. It's not where my head would have gone, but I get it. But yeah, what that means for Worlds is, I think, honestly, not a lot of impact. Not the same amount of impact that Dash.io is going to have on this World Championship, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny how tournaments happen like this, and then, there's multiple, I don't know. Sorry, I'm at a loss for what to say, but there's multiple things that happen, but one of those things comes away with the narrative. They become like the main character, and that very much is Dash.io. Like, it's not even, there was only one Dromai that converted. It's not, okay, and Uzuri made the top 8 and there was 2 Uzuri. It's not, there was one Max and Max did decently well. The whole entire narrative around Melbourne is like, there is this new premier deck that we need to be testing, we need to consider as a choice, and we need to be prepared for looking at the World Championship. That is the biggest takeaway from Melbourne. It is not for any reason or other. It has just risen to the top. Maybe it's because of coverage, it's because the X and O run, which is really hard to do, or it's because Tom is just a really likable guy. I don't know. But the takeaway from Melbourne, the takeaway from Melbourne is Dash.io. That is absolutely on the menu for the World Championships and might be one of the most played decks at the tournament. All these other decks, like the top 8 could be completely different, and it would not change anything about how I'm looking at the World Championship.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. I think that's going to do it for episode 135 of Arsenal Pass. Next week, we will be in person. Brendan, we're heading to the World Championship. So excited. This has come around quickly, I would say. I'm feeling a little bit underprepared, but I'm excited to be there in person to play the World Championships, and it's gonna be good.
Ready to draft? Get those bananas coming your way?
I am ready to draft because while I was bombing this weekend, I did manage to do 6 drafts, I think, with some of the best players in the world. So I think I posted on Twitter our first pod on the Friday afternoon, our second pod on the Friday afternoon, which was, I don't know, count the trophies in that draft pod, but there was 4 national champions, singular, but multiple national champions in there, Pro Tour champion, calling champions. It was an insane pod and learnt a lot from them, from the table. We also did some drafts with others as well along the weekend. So yeah, I learnt a lot about draft this weekend, which is super valuable, I think. And I'm having a lot more fun with this format than I was this time last week, that's for sure.
Interesting. So do you like it from the perspective of a competitive player, and to be playing it at an event of this magnitude?
I think I actually do. I think I might. Yeah, I'm coming around on that. I think if you'd asked me that last week, I would have said no. I'm probably forcing a particular hero, and I don't like this format. But definitely got humbled in some games this weekend on my thoughts, and also kind of evolved based on being at a draft table with other players who are really critical of the game and thinking about the way they want to draft. So.
Awesome. Well, look forward to seeing how it all plays out, and I look forward to seeing you in
before 03
in Barcelona. Oh, I love dual format tournaments. If you're listening to this podcast on pod platforms, there's a video version on YouTube at youtube.com/ArsenalPass. We're both on Twitter, Brendan APG, Finn_Dale, and of course, Deck Tech, Dash.io, Tom Holland on the eve of the World Championship.
Tom Holland.
Tom, did I say? What?
Spider-Man himself.
Yeah. New guest appearance. Anyway, so check that out. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, and I honestly can't wait. It's always fun as we lead up to these Pro Tours and we lead up to this World Championship. But these ones, the Worlds feels better. I mean, PT Baltimore was a bit of a wash for us because we didn't get like anybody out there. So now we're all coming back together for the World Championships, which is sweet. So thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you later.